So I made a video earlier talking about which positions does production project well to the NFL. So for example, for an edge rusher, if you're good at in college, you're probably going to be good in the NFL. For a quarterback, it's not quite that simple. If you're bad in college, you might still be good at the NFL level. And if you're really good in college, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good at the NFL level. There's more variance there. So I figured with this newfound knowledge that I have of knowing which positions there is good and bad in terms of using production to project to the next level, figured, well, why not look at some of these guys and see, okay, well, let's use that algorithm and figure out how well do you project at the NFL level? And so that's kind of an interesting thing to talk about and what we'll be doing with today's video. So all right, here's the chart. And first I have to explain what you're looking at. So column on the left, that's the player, the score. This is the score of 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. It's a little bit complex on how I got to the score, but again, if you want to watch my previous video, I explain all of that there, but just all you have to know is 4 means great, 3 means good, 2 means some value, and 1 means bust, and that's just the most likely outcome. So for example, on a lot of these offensive linemen where they graded that you see on the top, those are guys who project to be good. So that's the most likely outcome for them if you simply just look at Pro Football Focus grades and nothing else. So that's worth noting. Akeem Ekwanyu, you have Bernard Rainman, you have Tyler Linderbaum, and Trevor Penning. Now again, it's worth mentioning you shouldn't just look at this and say, oh, that's all we have to look at, because there's obviously more to it than that, and everything needs to be taken in context. And that's something with like Nick Benito, who he was good in college, but I kind of wonder with him personally, just my own thoughts on him, is I just wonder how well all of that stuff will work at the NFL level. It was successful in college, and so that does project well, but could you see him being an exception? I think there's some logic there. So that's why, again, I think you should start with the baseline of this is where they project and then work whichever way you want to work. So that's how I view this stuff. So like for Benito, I still think like, okay, well, there's still a good chance he can be successful because of this, but I'm going to bring him more further down, even though that's where he projects, because of I didn't love his film. That's how I've been evaluating prospects this year, and I feel like it's a pretty good way to do so. So again, I still think, though, for all these guys on this list who are in the good category, it's reason to be optimistic about them. If you're watching this video after the draft and your favorite team drafted one of these guys, it's certainly something to put in the positive column. Meanwhile, some guys over here, and again, I'm not going to go through every single person that's projected to go in the first round, because half of them play in positions where it doesn't really make much sense to look at the projections, but some of these you can. Like Devontae Wyatt, who I spelled his name wrong. I wrote a T instead of a Y, but just pretend that didn't happen. I mean, man, his name it says Wyatt. It has Y right there, and I forgot the Y. Anyways, he's projected to be good. Charles Cross and Evan Neal also projected to be good. Worth noting, though, someone like Wyatt, Cross, and Neal are very close to being at, or it's really Cross and Neal are on the borderline of being the next level up. I rounded up with Wyatt and Davis because they were also that way, but I just rounded up. But all these guys are actually close, or I guess really Cross and Neal are close to being in that 3.13 range. So I wouldn't necessarily just take Cross and Neal off the board. Specifically Cross. Neal was a little bit further away. Cross was just on that border. So I wouldn't necessarily say don't draft him early because of this. Because no, I think that you're close enough. Again, when you deal with these kind of things where you put everything in a box, it means that someone with an 81 grade gets the same projection as someone with an 89 grade. Well, Charles Cross had the 89 grade, which means he probably should have a better score than he does. But yeah, a couple of interesting things to note. I think there has been some discussion about Wyatt versus Davis. To me, this is a good indicator of probably should be Wyatt. That feels like fair, especially because I've watched both of their tape, and I actually like Wyatt's tape better on top of that. So when both of those things go together, I'm typically going to lean in a certain direction. Finally, these are the bad projections, and a little bit worth noting on a couple of these. There's, I have one actual asterisk, but a couple of overall asterisks. So first, Jermaine Johnson, who's projected for a 2.4 3 score, which is some value. So again, some value is like a guy who belongs in the NFL but isn't exactly a star. Not someone you don't want on your team, but just not someone who you're going to buy the jersey of. And again, for Johnson, that's kind of what he's at. His tape looked good when he got wins, and his frame is very good, but he just didn't win enough at the NFL level. It's also worth noting he's someone who was on the lower side of the category he was in, so maybe it should be lower than 2.3. Kyle Hamilton, another guy, and safeties does project pretty well. Like, production matters, and his production wasn't outstanding at Notre Dame. It really wasn't. He had some big splash plays, but he was not consistently great at Notre Dame. So there are some issues on tape. There are some issues with his grades. So that's why I'm lower on Hamilton than a lot of other people. Now, there's also reason to believe that his production can improve at the NFL level, which is why I don't have him as like a third-round talent, like the projection would say. But this is why I think that I have lower opinions on him, and I'm starting with the third-round talent and then working my way up to, oh no, he probably should be a first-rounder because of these things I see on tape. But I think it's more important to do it that way than look at his tape, say, oh my God, he should be first overall. There's some production issues, not a big deal. Like, no, it tends to matter, and the odds are against him a little bit. Now, David Ojabo is projected for a bust, but while I don't have an actual asterisk there, I am going to put one on there because his pass rush projection is actually for a very good player. It goes into good category for his pass rush. So his run defense wasn't spectacular, but he was already on the border of being into some value category, one chunk up in that Jermaine Johnson category. His grade and Johnson's grade weren't that different, so that's kind of where things get a little bit weird. And also, there's a legitimate reason to believe that Ojabo should be better than his PFF grade. He kind of is unpolished but can learn, and there are ways you can kind of teach him up a little bit. So that's why, even though the projection is a bust, I would ignore that projection because of all the other context that comes with it. And of course, for Trayvon Walker, again, the guy who I keep messing with on this channel. I'm not trying to. There's intrigue in him as a prospect. You might be wondering, well, wait a second. He's the one who gets the actual asterisk. What's worth noting with him? Well, the actual asterisk is there because his score was off the charts, and not in a good way. It was lower than my projection charts even go towards, and so the 1.3 might be generous. And remember, 1 is the lowest it gets. So not great. The projection is a bust. I didn't love his tape either. Chances are he's going to be a bust. I think that there's reason to believe that he won't be. I think there's reason to believe that he could be a lot better than this projection is going towards because he is such a great physical freak, quite frankly. So I would draft Trayvon Walker, just wouldn't draft him with a top 10 pick. That's my mindset. I think this is concerning, and that's kind of how I view this. Again, it's worth mentioning this is not an exact science, and just because I wouldn't take a flyer on Trayvon Walker with a top 5 pick does not mean he won't work out. I'm just saying I think there's a lesser chance that he works out than a Kayvon Thibodeaux works out. That's the way I view this stuff, is, guys like Aiden Hutchinson, who, those are two guys who we all know of, but, analytics say that they're going to also be very good. So I would much rather those players. I think that it's worth looking at this stuff. Again, we can debate how much does it matter, but I don't think we can debate that it doesn't matter. I said that weird. I think it's undebatable that it matters to some degree. Still said that weird. There's a way to say it. Clearly, I can't come up with it. But you know what I'm trying to say, I think. It matters. To some degree, it matters. How much remains to be seen. There's several things that are important. I still think watching film is probably the most important way to view a prospect because it gives you all that context that I said with some of these players. But looking at a PFF grade can really help you understand how a prospect is going to be at specific positions. Quarterback, don't care about it. Wide receivers, maybe a little bit, but really I don't care about that either. Really what I care about is in specific positions, in particular offensive and defensive line. Linebackers seemingly have a threshold they have to clear. There's a couple other ones, but that's pretty much it. So yeah, again, I find this stuff interesting. And does this guarantee that Kyle Hamilton is going to suck? No, of course not. I'm not trying to say it is. All I'm saying is that there's maybe a bigger risk factor with Hamilton because of the low production at the college level. There's a bigger risk factor with Trayvon Walker. There's also a lot of stuff to like about Trayvon Walker. If somehow the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ended up with Trayvon Walker, I'd be very happy about it because we pick late in the draft and I would totally talk myself into it. If you're a Lions fan watching this video, I don't, and you think that you're going to end up with Trayvon Walker, this isn't a death sentence. He could end up being solid. Just, that's my opinion on it. But yeah, that's what I think. And of course, it always ends up with me spending a while talking about Walker because he's the more interesting prospect that we've seen in a while, I think. But yeah, anyways, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.